let's just quickly say, colleagues, I think I've got most of the people here. We've got 5, 6, 7, 8. We're looking for 2, T.P. and Joseph. But I think let's get started because we arranged from 11 to 12 for Michael. I'm just going to turn the laptop a little bit, Michael, so that you can get a sense of
yes.
And maybe you guys can say hi to Michael there.
Hi.
So, colleagues, just from my side, more formally, just had a chat with Michael. We're very grateful to have Michael Salkow here to participate in our conversation this morning. I actually came across Michael and his supervisor's work online with a publication that's related to AI. And when we actually met online, Michael and myself, for the first time, I only then realized that Michael was also South African. He's now living in the UK, and he actually studied at a university that's nearby to where I grew up in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. So it's a small world, a small digital world as well. But for the purposes of today, Michael has just completed his master's degree, as I've shared with you, and he's used AI extensively in that whole process. And he also had have a supervisor that's very open towards the creative use of AI in the whole research process. So without further ado, Michael, thank you once again for your time and for the preparation, and we're looking forward to your inputs. We've got an hour, so take your time, and if there are any questions, colleagues, can you just, as previously, make some notes at the end if you have anything that you want to ask Michael, share some comments and ideas. You're welcome to do that. Okay, so Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel it's a privilege to be able to speak to the students. Just to confirm, is everyone a student or is everyone a supervisor in some respect, or just so I have some understanding, if that's okay?
I think there's a mixed bunch here. So I think some of us are students, some do supervisory capacity. There's some of us that are lecturers as well. So it's a bit of a
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I guess let me start just about me. So I've been working in learning and development for, about 15 years, I would say, in different roles in the charitable sector, in the public sector, and in civil service at the court service, always in learning and development type roles. And I've always had an interest in developing my own learning as well as others. My studies in Cape Town was in philosophy and psychology. Then I moved back to Nelson Mandela University, where I'm from, in Port Elizabeth, and I studied a psychology honors degree. Then I took a break and I traveled the world, and I landed up in the UK. But that didn't mean that my studies stopped. I did a lot of different courses in various things, in coaching, in mentoring, in restorative justice. I worked in the criminal justice field for quite a while. So learning has always been a big part of what I do. When I decided, as part of my work, to do a master's in digital education, I wanted it to be very meaningful for me and meaningful for my work. There had been quite a gap between the point of me finishing my undergrad and taking on a postgrad. If I'm accurate, probably about 16 to 17 years gap, which is quite a long time to go back into education. And the world of education, higher education, had certainly changed in that time frame from what I was used to, at least. In my job, I do, as I said, a lot of digital learning. So I had a keen interest in digital technology. And when I was made aware of AI in, I think around about November, maybe even before that, somewhere around that last year, when AI was pretty new, I was discussing, my lecturer, my supervisor, Chrissy, at the time was saying, this is the next big thing. And I was like, is it? And then I started exploring it. And she said, I think you should really think about how to maybe use AI in your dissertation research. And then I came across some of the work that she was doing, which I'll mention here in my slides. So what I want to talk to you about is my experience, basically, as a student using generative AI in my dissertation research as part of my studies at the University of Leeds. I've been involved in a few recent discussions, one hosted, funnily enough, by the Nelson Mandela University, which was fantastic because I got to meet people from my old university, which was really good, and to hear some of the things that they were doing. This was a 90-minute presentation to a number of students. Again, it wasn't just from my input. There were a number of presenters, and I've put the link, the outline of that presentation here, and I'll share the slides with you. It was a really interesting discussion about how artificial intelligence might be used in higher education, not just in a research capacity or when you do a dissertation, but just generally about learning in higher education. So it was a really useful conversation. Another one I was involved in recently was, again, exploring everyday creativity of generative AI for learning. And this looked at specifically the publication that I think you might have referred to, Sonia, the 101 Creative Ideas to Use Gen AI in Education, a crowdsourced collection. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. I've got a few slides. This was quite recent. This was just last week, I think, or the week before, on the 24th of January. And I got to do a very brief presentation, 5 to 10 minutes, again, about my experience as a student. So there are lots of, and there are more. I haven't put everything, but there are lots of conversations going on around the use of AI. A lot of times, I think some of the issues go towards the ethical use of AI in education, which is somewhat what I'll talk to, and hopefully you'll see how the way I've conducted myself has hopefully been ethical and upholds academic integrity. So as I said, I got into this because my supervisor is one of the leaders for the hashtag creativeHE community. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the creativeHE community, but the goal of the community, I guess, is to support pedagogical rebels and free-thinking innovators in experimenting with, developing, sharing, and getting support for novel learning and teaching ideas. I guess the premise here is to think out the box, to not go with the norm. And sometimes that means that together we aim to transform the student and staff experience within and beyond institutional boundaries. So I think that's an important point, because as AI is developing, each university across the globe is trying to work out how can AI be used ethically, how can we incorporate it into learning rather than just push it to the side and ignore its existence, because that, I guess, is not the right approach. So this community brings, I guess, creative educational practitioners and students together. It offers this kind of space for experimentation and exploration of new and unusual ideas. There's a lot of different events that are organized, courses that are maybe available, and they look for submissions to different pieces of work, and I'll provide some information, and there's a link in my presentation to their website. And they also look to create open educational resources that could be used across the world, trying to support Sustainable Development Goal 4 of making education available and quality education, as well as for lifelong learners. The idea is to develop creative practices, and it's a growing area of, I guess, scholarly research and art activities, but it's about building this community together around openness in education. This is a quote that I thought is really powerful, and it kind of sets the premise for today. So it's by Thomas and Celie Brown, and it says, "Only when we care about experimentation, play, and questions more than efficiency, outcomes, and answers do we have a space that is truly open to the imagination. And where imaginations play, learning happens." So I think the idea here is to be creative, to experiment, to try things and see what works and see what doesn't work. And that's how we develop new and maybe novel ideas. As I mentioned to you, the publication that was produced was the 101 Creative Ideas to Use AI in Education. It was a crowdsourced resource, I guess. I think there were, I can't remember exactly how many countries, but there were a significant amount of countries across the world that contributed, people. And this was at the very early stages of AI development. So things have moved on since then, and there are new calls to contribute to more open resources that are being created. This particular resource has been downloaded, I think, more than 21,000 times so far, which is a success, I would say. But there are really good ideas in there on how to use AI in different ways in higher education. I strongly recommend you have a look at it. I think the deadline, like what Chrissy said, for the new call is supposed to be at the end of January today, but she said she's quite open if anyone wants to contribute, that she would extend that for others. So I can send the links to that later. Or if you want, you can just contact Chrissy by email. So my dissertation research, I guess, what was it about, firstly? As I said to you, I work for a public body now, within the NHS. It's a special health board called Public Health Scotland. I wanted to explore digital learning, and particularly accessibility in digital learning, how to integrate accessibility. The idea behind it is to reduce the digital inequalities in society and make sure that education is inclusive. A lot of individuals could be left behind if we don't ensure resources that we produce, whether those are e-learning courses, face-to-face sessions that have a digital component, presentations, etc. Afterwards, when you design things, you need to make sure that it's inclusive for people that might use screen readers or other individuals that have additional kind of requirements. So I wanted to research learning technologists' experiences in NHS Scotland, where we have 150,000 staff members in NHS in Scotland, how they develop learning resources to make sure it's accessible for individuals. I decided, and I'll talk to you through how I came to these kind of decisions, but I decided to use a qualitative approach. I've always been someone who thinks that my perception is things can't always be defined by numbers. And I wanted to explore the experiences of people, and that naturally lends itself to qualitative type of research. And from me, my kind of philosophy is around interpretivism or constructivist kind of philosophy. Because of time, I had to use a single point in time and do what I thought would be a good idea, to do a case study where I perceived the 7 learning technologists that I interviewed as forming the case, the bounded case to study. I used semi-structured interviews, and I also looked at secondary sources of data, such as NHS documents about digital learning, reports that had been done in the past or created in the past. Those were supportive data sources, but also kind of formed part of the literature review in some sense as well, or at least it helped me indicate where there were certain gaps in the research in digital learning and around accessibility, particularly in the context of the NHS. I wanted to use, I thought it was best to use thematic analysis based on Braun and Clark. And I think Ryan and Bernard's theme searching methods is the 2 type of thematic analysis approaches that I took. So the research explored the learning technologists in NHS's experiences, round about their perceptions and attitudes, competencies and skills, challenges and barriers towards integrating accessibility principles and guidelines into the design and delivery of inclusive digital learning. It's quite a long statement. Those areas around competencies and skills, challenges and barriers, perceptions and attitudes, that kind of came to me from discussion with AI tools. When I started looking into it, that is where that kind of came from. Before I actually go into what I did, I just want to say that it's really important from the start to make sure you kind of understand your organizations or your institutions' policies around AI and assessments. Now, I know this is a developing area, so I guess it's important from my point of view to balance this element of creativity that was being not pushed on me, but inspired in me by Chrissy to explore and experiment. And to still maintain academic rigor. So I would say the very first thing that's, to me, quite critical is to have supervision. It's really important that I wasn't just left to just go and do something without being contained in some way. And I'm not saying contained in a negative sense. I'm saying it in more like being grounded in academic rigor. That's what I needed. I needed to know what were the boundaries and what could I do and what could I not do. The values that I tried to illustrate or evidence throughout was around honesty, transparency, openness, and maintaining academic integrity, but also my own integrity, to not fully rely on AI tools, to use an element of human critical thinking, which I think is essential, not to simply rely on the generative AI in its entirety. You need to apply your own level of thinking, and that'll become clear as I talk a bit more. There were some ethical frameworks and guidance, but as I said, it was still developing at that stage. So the regular discussion with my supervisor was quite important to know, for me to understand the boundaries in some respect. Some of the things that have come out recently from the university, pretty much after I started, were things like the use of AI can be used for things like drafting and structuring content, generating ideas, maybe comparing content that was created by the human versus AI, creating content in particular styles, producing summaries, analyzing content, reframing content, researching and seeking answers, creating any artwork and things like that with AI, engaging in like a conversation with AI in kind of a playful and supportive way. And it could be other things like developing code and stuff, which I didn't use, but also translating content if you need it translated from one language to another. And I guess those are some of the things that have been said in the University of Leeds' policy that is acceptable to do. So that was somewhat the framework I was working within. And recently, this publication came out. It only came out last week, so I haven't actually had a chance to look at it properly. But what the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Student Education at the University of Leeds said about this was that about this area was that generative AI has the potential to transform education and learning and to develop new forms of creativity. But at the same time, it's full of biases, inaccuracies, and other issues. We need to hedge our moments to explore its full potential while recognizing its flaws and issues. I found AI to be incredibly helpful for me, but I agree with this statement. It can be full of inaccuracies and biases if you're not sure what you're looking for and if you don't know your context. And that's something I'll talk about quite a lot, I think, context, and what AI actually understands by it. Chrissy said it was really important. Chrissy, my supervisor, said it was really important for me to document my experience as I use AI, simply because it's still a novel idea, but at the same time, it's part of those values of openness and transparency. So partway through, I would say after I had completed my literature review, Chrissy asked me to write this article for the Media and Learning Association. So the link's over here, and I'll let you read it. It's not very long, but it does document kind of my experience to the point, and I provide 5 key insights from my use of AI up to that point. This presentation probably goes beyond that because now I've completed the other sections on my findings and my discussion. So I've added to this paper, but nonetheless, I think it'll be useful here. one kind of important statement that I made in this paper was using AI for research requires a judicious blend of AI insights with human critical thinking. And I think the word judicious is quite important. You need to judge and be comfortable that what you're doing is ethical, and you are not simply copying and pasting things, that you are using the AI as a support mechanism. I would describe it as a study buddy slash supportive partner and a 24/7 available supervisor, but not a human supervisor, if that makes sense. Not someone who knows the ins and outs of the university and what's expected, and just someone who can relate to context. But nonetheless, it is like a partner in some respect. So another thing is I asked ChatGPT to give me feedback on my article afterwards, just to understand what I thought of it, what I thought about what I had said about my use of AI. And it provided a useful, I guess, summary. It said, your article provides a thorough exploration of integrating AI into dissertation research, emphasizing collaboration between AI tools and human intellect. The detailed account of your journey from leveraging ChatGPT 3.5 to using tools like Cite AI and SciSummary add practical insights. I'll talk about some of those tools as we go. And then it said, the acknowledgement of the symbiotic relationship between AI precision and human critical thinking enhances the credibility of your approach. Additionally, highlighting the potential digital inequalities in accessing AI tools raises awareness about the challenges in the educational landscape. And that's an important point that I want to make. Some of the tools that I used were free. Quite a few of them were free. Some of them were not free. And that raises the issue that my organization tries to tackle, I guess, is Public Health Scotland is about promoting health and tackling inequalities in society. So I also have a secondary motive, I would say, is to ensure that as things progress, some students are not left behind. Those that might experience inequalities or digital inequalities based on, the digital divide or whatever debate you want to have. I tried to use as many tools as possible that were free, but unfortunately for some, I had to pay a small fee. And I acknowledge that some students won't be able to do that. That's something of a broader issue rather than something I can tackle here. But nonetheless, I acknowledge it, and I am 100% for open educational resources. So how did I do this? I guess I started with my idea. I had this idea of what I wanted to do in accessibility in digital education in the NHS. So I started discussing my idea predominantly with ChatGPT. And I asked it questions. What do you know about accessibility? How do you integrate accessibility in digital learning? What are some of the complications? Can you tell me any studies that have been done? This and that. What I found was that it was really good at explaining the concepts. But when it came to the particulars about research that had been done, simply the references and all of that just wasn't there for ChatGPT. But it gave me the concept and the idea of what I should I go and do after that. It was really helpful to discuss the idea, and there's no limitations on how many questions you can ask. Sometimes I did find that it's only as good as the prompts that you put in or the context that you kind of create for it. It certainly helped me to gain insights on the topic that I was looking at and explore some of the initial gaps around accessibility in digital learning in particular. I think that could probably be used for any topic in some way, because ChatGPT's, I don't want to say knowledge, but information that it's able to generate is vast. And I don't think if you asked it a question, an unreasonable question, it wouldn't be able to give you information, but then you as the human need to take that and apply it and think about it in your context, and the bigger purpose of your research and what you want to do. the research gap. So it gave me an indication about maybe where the research gap was lying, but I still needed to look at other studies, of course, in the literature review to firm up that gap. But in terms of the gap, the aim and the purpose, I discussed this at length with ChatGPT, and you need to know, as I said, what you want to achieve from your research. Through that kind of discussion, it will really set you on a path. And also at that stage, at a very early stage, I think I was even asking it, so based on this gap, could you give me an outline for what areas you would cover in a dissertation research project? What would you explore? What kind of questions would you be looking at? General kind of things, just at that stage to give me an idea, which I would later firm up once I had thought about it more and once I had done some reading on the literature review. But it gave me a clear sense, I guess, of a purpose for my research project. It helped me understand the so what. So why am I doing this? What is this about? What am I actually looking at? What am I wanting to achieve by this? What do I actually need to do? For someone who had been out of education higher education for 17, 18 years, I forgot I forgot my way, if I can put it that way. Even though I did, a research module and things like that, still, when you actually have to do it, it can be overwhelming sometimes for a student. So just talking through with someone who's not going to judge you or anything well, I wouldn't say someone, a machine that's not going to judge you, was really helpful for me to gain that sense of, so what is this about and what am I going to do? It really helped me define the scope of my investigation. Although I think it sometimes struggles with context, it did give me kind of parameters into what I should be exploring. At first, I actually wanted to explore way wider, just around inequalities in digital education. And well, I think when I really thought about it, that was probably more of a PhD. And I narrowed it down to one particular area around accessibility as a form of inclusive digital education. But it helped me narrow the scope of my investigation. I don't know how else I can phrase it other than through the discussions, I realized I'm almost creating a mountain for myself. Let me contain it to one particular area. And actually, that was really useful. And I remember phoning Chrissy that day afterwards and telling her, and it really helped me focus. It really did. At this stage, I hadn't written anything, by the way. I was just doing my exploration in the initial stages. I think, as I said to you, AI can really struggle to understand the context. It kept saying things like its perception of healthcare was quite different from what I was trying to do. I wasn't as focused on healthcare as I was on digital learning, if that makes sense. It was the digital learning aspect, which maybe could have been in any context in some respect, not just NHS, but NHS, because I've been working in the NHS for a while, I understood the context way more than ChatGPT. And also I understood some of the struggles as a learning technologist as well. I understood some of the struggles I experienced, and I wanted to explore that with others. So it did struggle in a lot of respects to understand the context, but nonetheless, it was really helpful in other areas. You must apply that human critical thinking. What's also really important, in my view, is to understand the boundaries of AI. And through exploration, through giving it a try, you'll start to realize what AI can do and where it can help, and where you have to realize, I need to put that work in now, or I need to do some more around that. Once you understand the boundaries, I think it helps you understand better the objectives of your research when you're trying to find that potential gap and its aim and your purpose and stuff like that. But you got to explore it in order to understand it, the boundaries. In terms of my research questions, I was really able to define develop and refine my research questions. I went through a few iterations of research questions. Firstly, I wanted to know, so what kind of research questions would you ask about this if it was qualitative research? You might ask more what type of questions, etc., and not really questions that are trying to correlate things or anything like that. It helped me refine them to a point where I was really comfortable. And those questions, I think, were based around what I'd said. What are the perceptions and attitudes of learning technologists in NHS Scotland? What are the skills and competencies? What are the challenges and barriers? Trying to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes I think research questions are too complicated, and then you find it difficult to actually research what you're looking for. So it helped me keep it within a manageable kind of level of simplicity. Developing it, and this is not just about research questions, but using AI for me was a collaborative effort to apply that human intellect and that extra thing that AI offers you quickly and efficiently. I used it to get feedback and engage in discussion, to understand the type of research that would be best to investigate or explore the gap that I had found, the context I was working within, the purpose and the aims of my objectives. So that initial groundwork, I would say, took a while, but it was really, really useful before starting any literature search. So I knew from this point I wanted to do qualitative, exploratory kind of research. Then I started looking at the literature. So what I would say is you cannot take away the use of notable search engines or databases that maybe are available through your university. I think I used things like Scopus. I used the university's database engine. I also used maybe Google Scholar. I used Academia. I used ERIC, various different databases that you might have thought about. One thing I did try and explore was Cite.ai, which is supposed to be, I think here's a screenshot of it over here. You can ask it a question, or you can put in your research question, one of your research questions, and it should bring up articles with references and all of that. It's supposed to be a proper database. Or you can search by author, etc., and then it shows you links, it shows you summaries. It really is quite a useful thing, and you can then ask it questions about those articles to see if it contains information that you're looking for, and it all can be done very quickly. There is a free trial, but other than that, I explored the free trial. I think it was 7 days, and then I didn't go on to purchase it. I just didn't feel it was for me. But I can really see how it could be useful. I decided to just go with a more natural approach, a more standard approach, I guess, for doing a literature search. Having experienced the Chat GPT initially, and when I'd asked it for some references, I just wasn't firmly comfortable. I just felt a hesitancy to rely on Cite.ai and AI references just in general. So I was taking a cautious approach here. My view was I would seek out the published papers, the articles, etc. But what I would do with them when I found them, that was a different matter. So the AI tools that I was using helped, I guess, in recommending different areas for me to go and investigate and look up keywords here. And I would ask it, so what keywords should I ask in a search engine to be able to find articles, things like that. And it was really helpful in that respect. And then I would recommend for any student to just explore just diverse articles, theoretical papers or empirical research studies, etc. And you just simply can't get that from a tool like ChatGPT. You could maybe get it from Cite.ai. I just didn't give it the time that maybe I didn't have the time for that at one stage. And I was also a little bit hesitancy and the cost involved. I didn't want to pay the cost. Continue with the literature review. So once I found my articles, what I found though was the AI tools really did aid in summarizing those articles and cataloging them for me. I also used spreadsheets to catalog my literature review, and I looked at around 60 different research papers and articles, conference papers, journal articles, etc. I used tools such as SciSummary and Quillbot. Now, initially SciSummary was free, and then I was paying £4.99 per month for, I think I kept it for 2 months, 2 to 3 months while I used it. So I paid about £10 for that over the term. And Quillbot, I didn't pay anything, but Quillbot, there's a limit on how much you can summarize. So just as an example, in SciSummary, you can upload a PDF document of an article or research paper, and it will give you a breakdown of the key points, the summary, the methodology, what was used. It was really helpful, almost like something more than the abstract, if that makes sense. I know the abstract's there for you to look at, and of course I would look at abstracts, but if you had 60, 25 to 30 page documents, it was really hard to look at all of that. So these summarizers certainly helped me. Quillbot is something that could be used as well for more than just a summarizer. You can ask it to create bullet points for you and various things. It's got a citation generator and various other things. But these tools really helped in summarizing and distilling these complex ideas into really key points for me. As I said, you could just ask it for paragraphs. You could ask it for a long summary, a short summary, a medium summary, or bullet point summary. And those really then helped you to then take what you needed from those papers and put them in your literature review. So I would say one of my key tips here is take time to explore and use AI for your advantage. Use what it can offer that you can't do quickly. Use that for your advantage. In terms of my methodology, I had a lot of discussion with ChatGPT about research philosophy. I haven't been out of this area for a while. I know this is one that is usually difficult for students to understand the methodology. So for me, it was about gaining a better understanding of my own positions, my ontological and epistemological assumptions that I was making, about understanding the difference between deductive and inductive research and approaches. So I really came to it improved my understanding of it, which was then enabled me to write appropriately about it. It helped me understand the research design that I wanted to use, about case study research, understand the limitations. So I would ask questions. What are the limitations of case study research, and who said that, and why, and how did they find it? Sometimes then I would need to then go and find those articles in another database. I wouldn't trust the AI tool and the references, but it really did help me understand the limitations, for example. And then I would discuss things like my positionality in the research, my sampling strategy, my data collection method, my analysis method, the ethical considerations. I would engage in endless discussion around that with different tools. By different tools, I'm saying ChatGPT. I use Google Bard as well, and I would kind of compare the two and see what it said. But it was really, really helpful in the methodology, which I know is usually a stumbling block for many students. It helped me then to develop my interview questions. Now that I had my research questions, I would throw it in and say, these are my research questions. I want to do a semi-structured interview, about 40 minutes to 45 minutes. What questions would I ask around it? It gave me a whole lot. I would then narrow it down to say, okay, so these are the 5 I was going to ask about that question, 5 on that, and 5 on that. It was really, really useful. In terms of my findings and analysis, I found it was really supportive in helping me theme and analyze the findings. So just to give you an idea, I conducted these interviews. I had transcripts created through Microsoft Teams. I reviewed the transcripts. I fixed the errors. I made wee notes along the transcripts, trying to think about what it was saying, etc. And I also had Grammarly inbuilt on my computer, which is a paid-for subscription, and it's not cheap, which is a writing aid in effect. But you can highlight a piece of text and you can ask it to like tell you what that means, or put it in another words and things like that, which was helpful. But you could also use other tools to put in those transcripts, removing any personal data, because I think there's an ethical implication there around using some of the transcript data if there's sensitive information. I reviewed it and I found there wasn't anything sensitive or that would break confidentiality. And I know this is maybe a slightly contentious issue about putting information into a machine to kind of generate a theme for you, but I anonymized it as much as possible. And at one stage, what I ended up doing is I took all the transcripts and I put them all together into one document. And then I threw that into different tools. I tried ChatGPT, I tried Atlas TI, which is one I'll show you coming up soon, and it helped me to theme and analyze the findings. It helped me organize it, identify patterns from the data, and in my view, I could have done it alone, but it would have taken a lot of time, and I believe that I had written down notes throughout the interviews, and all of those keywords kept coming up when I looked and I threw it into the AI tools. It was generating the same kind of codes and patterns that I had been thinking of, just in a more systematic way. And in my view, it added to the rigor of my data analysis, if I'm honest. It helped me create a thematic map. Not exactly like that. I went and organized it afterwards, but it helped me clearly understand what were my themes, what were my sub-themes, what were for example, here, I'll just take number 2, a cultural shift and resistance. It told me there was a necessity of a cultural shift. We needed to prioritize accessibility across all organizational functions. There needed to be clearer roles, responsibility, and resources. There was also a gradual improvement in awareness, resistance, and a lack of understanding. And then I would go and write about all these different kind of themes that were coming out. So I found it incredibly helpful. As I said, I used Atlas TI, which I've never used like in some of the other tools. I don't know if it's NVivo or them before, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. But I was very careful about what I put into this Atlas TI. I used the free trial initially, and then I think I paid. Did I pay? No, I didn't pay. I think I just used up the free trial, and I made sure I got everything in there as quickly as possible. I think I even created 2 different accounts, one on my personal just to test it first, and then one on my student account when I had tested it and I knew what I was doing, so I wasn't wasting time. It really helped me to visualize the data. And overall, it helps you understand what the data is telling you and frames it in, for me, in a coherent structure that I could then present to my writing. And again, I was using Atlas TI and ChatGPT in corresponding. So I was saying to ChatGPT, this is some of the themes that have been found from our findings. Can we talk about it in relation to what we had talked about earlier in my research purpose, my gap, my aim, etc. So it was going back, and it was a whole kind of conversation going on. In my view, the strengths with AI here are about synthesizing information for you, knitting it together. Things that you put into it, it can knit it together for you. And then it helped me, as I said, with data visualization. So I've just got a few examples here. These are some of the codes or the key kind of words that kept coming up in the transcripts. And you can see things around collaboration, professional development, responsibilities. When I was talking about that, cultural shift will be somewhere in there, etc. It was really helpful. And then I was also able to match some of the core codes, I guess, to participants. These participants over here are anonymized. Those aren't their real names, etc. So, and it kind of gave me a visual of, oh, okay, so Gabby, these are some of the critical issues for Gabby. Isabella, these are some, and Eleanor. It really helped me visualize some of that. And that was all done at the click of a button or two. It also brought up all the different quotes within the data and how it related to the different codes. So if I was looking for a quote on frustration, for example, here I can see there were 35 kind of quotes on frustration, and I could go and look through really quickly and pick out what I wanted, because I had 320 pages of transcript data. 7 40-minute interviews generates a lot of information. And I think I was able to filter out what I had said in the transcript and what the participants had said in the transcript. Interpreting, The data, so I discussed the codes and patterns and themes with AI tools to get an alternative explanation and interpretation based on what I had thought, based on what it was thinking, and I tried to like marry it up to think about what I actually wanted to say. It certainly offered me insights and implications of the findings. So I would ask it, so what does this actually mean now for the NHS and this and that, based on my research questions, objectives, and the purpose of my study. It provided a good structure for how to present my discussion and interpretation. And it also offered me a few recommendations about what are future recommendations based on this. Some I used, some I didn't use, some are modified. I didn't find it was very good at linking back to the literature review and the studies that I'd done. I talked to it about it, but I ended up doing that myself. I think that was a human critical thinking task, if I'm honest with you. I didn't feel the AI was able to create that connection and context with the literature review and what was said there and what I now found. As I said, it requires the human to relate it to the context. Just one or two more slides. As I said about writing aids, I used writing aids for language and grammar errors, to simplify text, and to adapt the tone, to adapt the text to the right tone for my audience, for an academic style and professional style. I think you can get a bit caught up with writing tools. I find Grammarly incredibly helpful, but I do acknowledge there's some risks there for students if they were to rely too much on these writing aids. Sometimes I would dictate to Word and I would just speak my mind like I'm speaking now. And then I would use the writing aid to try and just formulate it into, just to create it into a coherent text for me. And that was fine. And then I needed to review and think, is that what I was actually saying? That's the point I'm trying to make here. If you just ask the writing tool to do it and then just accept that that's right, that could be an issue. So my experience, I think it enhances efficiency, accuracy, and the depth of my analysis that I conducted. I hope that I gave it justice when I said I would do it honestly, transparently, with integrity and openness, which I think is essential if you were to use it ethically and responsibly. It was supportive for me. I also gained support from a very collaborative digital community around me, other MA students, my supervisor, who provided feedback, etc. And as I said, who grounded me in my kind of approach and also enriched it. And I've talked to you about this element of free tools versus subscription or paid for tools, which there's an area of inequalities that needs to be explored further. So I guess the last thing I would ask you, and this is maybe something to reflect on, is what if all students were able to use AI tools ethically and responsibly to conduct research and write up a dissertation, from the idea generation to the research gap, aim and purpose, the literature review, their methodology, their findings and discussion. Can students uphold academic integrity using AI? And what are the implications for supervision going forward? Thank you for your attention. I hope that was helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sorry if I took a little bit long.
Michael, thank you so much. It's very insightful. I'm gonna turn the laptop around, or if you can see the group at least. Colleagues, any comments or questions to Michael? This is now from a student perspective. Selassie, your question.
Thank you. My question was on the
ethics.
When my current knowledge about ethics, I know that one of the difficulties is where we get our ethics from. But most of the time it's from our authority. But with the less development of ethics around the use of AI, and from what he said, he had to come up with his own ethics. And so he said, and to build integrity and transparency. If that happens, is it not going to create complexity around the ethics? Because then we'll be left to decide what integrity means, because probably what integrity means to be different from what it means to others. So some chaos might come out of that. That is if it is left for us.
Yeah. Michael, the question, I don't know whether you've heard it, all of it, it's around ethics and ethical guidelines and ethical implications. And, you know, is it a student's responsibility? Is it, you know, that top-down type of approach with institutional ethical guidelines? So if you could speak about that, that's great.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think it's a good question. I think from my perspective, there's a balance between students who are, well, for University of Leeds, you complete an academic integrity test, right? You're basically saying, I understand the ethics involved. I understand what academic integrity is about. But at the same time, I do think for this particular case for me, because it's a new area, my supervisor was critical for me because she was asking me to explore AI. And I think maybe down the line when universities have a bit more clarity about what is an ethical use of AI, because that's still developing, then more onus can be put on the student. But at this stage, I would think there needs to be a balance between the student understanding and good supervision to make sure the student stays within a boundary. Just at this stage, down the line, I perceive that to maybe change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, happy with that.
So then it means that we cannot just say that there is no ethical boundary. There may be some problem. There ought to be that collaboration.
Yeah. That's understandable. Any other questions, colleagues, or comments? Richard, yeah?
I wanted to find out, with regards to the tools that he mentioned, it appears when it comes to analysis of the data, they are very good with the social sciences. Now, if your results are a bit more empirical or experimental, are they also good in analyzing it?
You mean if I did more quantitative kind of research or more experimental? I don't know. That would be probably for someone else to attempt. I think they would need to use a different range of tools from what I used. The one Atlas TI is particularly good for thematic analysis. That's what I found. So that's why I decided to use that for coding and things. I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm not as clued up about quantitative style of research versus qualitative. I'd never really thought about doing that. But I would think if it's more scientific style of research, you need to think carefully about if the AI tools could support that. That's just my gut feel, but I couldn't give you a solid answer. But I would be maybe a bit more wary.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Michael. Other questions? Yeah. Yes, did I say anything?
Thank you. From what you said and from what we learned from the presentation, in terms of expertise about and from what you said, that looking at it, the fact that he had been away, he was more comfortable with AI because AI will not be judgmental as the gap. So I was thinking that with this, then from his experience, in which I think it will be more comfortable for all of us, or majority of the people. And I'm thinking that then for education, there will be a shift in terms of government intervention. For now, they build classrooms, the issue of school uniforms. Yeah. So if I'm comfortable with AI, I can sit in my room and have access to expertise. And so probably there's going to be a shift in how government intervenes, so that in terms of the cost, about the ones that are free, the ones that you would have to pay, then it means that the focus of government intervention might be towards that instead of building classrooms or other things. That was.
I hear you. So you're talking about the broader societal sort of changes, potential changes that could take place as well. Michael, did you hear Sebastian's comment there?
Yeah, if you could just, I missed some of it, but I think the question / statement is around the Sustainable Development Goal 4, I think, about quality education for all and making it affordable, available, and make sure that there are opportunities for learners at all age of life. For example, myself at a later, well, I wouldn't say late stage, but a later stage in life and not straight out of school, for example, or within schools. I think you're talking as well about making education fruitful and available to all and quality. Is that the kind of the question that was asked?
Yeah.
I think that the world's got a long way to go, if I can put it that way. I have a real fear, if I'm honest with you, about certain students, particular countries being left behind. As the world of digital is advancing at a rapid pace, as we know. 5 years ago, things were incredibly different to they are today. So my fear is that as you mentioned, different governments across the world are not as not as, I wouldn't say forward thinking, but as open to exploring and implementing technology in a way that supports people in their education and their learning. That's my concern that I have. I couldn't fix it. I'm just one individual. But I think I'm certainly an advocate for open educational resources that are available on a range of devices. But first and foremost, those devices need to be available for the individuals that need them. And that's a matter that's a big matter as well.
Yeah, I hear you, Michael. Thank you.
Like a follow-up. So my thinking is that then, like with all of us who now know this, that will call for more advocacy that will draw government attention. That, like for Ghana, instead of investing the money that would have been invested in putting a building, that money could be channeled in getting probably internet accessibility to all.
I think it also comes back to what we said on Monday morning, that the importance of education and educating and being educated and understanding the broader implications of this as well within the unique context of each of the different environments as well. And starting small normally with your institution that you work at, and then want to think bigger and broader about that as well, most certainly. Michael, I'm going to ask one last question, if that's okay with you. And I think maybe
sure.
Our experiences as students or supervisors, etc., will be interesting to see here. Maybe just to clarify a little bit more, you touched on it largely, your supervisor's role in this whole process, and from the beginning to the end. If you could maybe just briefly elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah. I mean, Chrissy asked me a couple of times, do you need me? Do you need me as a supervisor? And I said, absolutely, I do. Maybe I was a bit more mature as a student than others, and I would ask less of the smaller questions of her, but more of the broader questions. But as I said, that weight that I would put on a human supervisor, someone who is experienced in research or in education far more than what I was, and someone who was able to just listen and say, oh, I think you need to be cautious there, or that's a great idea, go forward with that, explore that to the max, or this, or do you know about this? You can't take that away. And even so, just because I used AI tools doesn't mean that it would reflect in my writing afterwards. So I would use them. I would then write a piece like my introduction or my literature review, and I'd give it to Chrissy for feedback, and I'd give it to the other MA students who are doing their dissertation, and I get feedback from them. I don't think you can take away that importance of having that person available to you. But from a supervisor's perspective, I think if you have students that are using these tools, you need to be aware of what they do, what they can offer. And I think you need to support them to do it, but support them to maintain that ethical stance on it and do it openly. Don't hide it, explain it, reference, like you. I don't know how it might go down the line, but people might be referencing ChatGPT. You know, you just need to think about it as another author, I would say, that is supporting your thinking and how you do it. So I think the role of a supervisor is critical, if I'm honest with you. But it's probably going to change to how a supervisor might have been in the past if you have someone using AI. But again, it depends on your relationship and your level of student that you might have, if you know, and how they think about their studies. As I said, I don't want to generalize, but some students might just want to get things done. For me, I really wanted to make it worthwhile, fruitful for my own learning, but also useful for my organization. So I put a tremendous amount of time and effort in, and Chrissy helped me. Like, I know I said ChatGPT gave me a framework, but Chrissy helped give me an even larger framework to work within and boundaries.
Thanks for that, Michael. I appreciate that. It answered your question as well. Okay. All right, brilliant. Michael, it's been such a pleasure having you in the course, and thank you so much for your input. It's hugely appreciated, and I think all of us learned an awful lot from you as well. And thank you for the time that you took out of your workday and for the preparation and for sharing your knowledge and experience. We appreciate it very much.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, Michael. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.